Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live. Talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynncullenshow@gmail.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
And a good morning to you all. Thanksgiving Eve morning, 2024. And I want to wish you all a very happy holiday, whatever and wherever it takes you. And if you're traveling, God help you and keep your cool. I read something this morning about Thanksgiving that I don't know. You know, we all have favorite holidays. I know Thanksgiving is often a favorite holiday for people. And one such person wrote a piece about it. Her name is Kate Cohen, and she enjoys cooking. A lot of people have been doing a lot of cooking in the last few days and will do even more today and tomorrow. And for some, it is drudgery. For others, it is joy. Whatever it is, substantial work. And for those of you who don't do the cooking, I sure hope that you are appreciative and tell those who are doing all this work to create this holiday and feast that you are appreciative. It's funny, in my family, with Susan and me, these strong feminists, my family is, except for my son and my sister's son, when we get together, it reverts to old, gendered behavior, in that the women do all the work. All the work. They figure out the menu, they do the shopping, they do the cooking, they do the baking, they set the table, they clean up afterwards. Now, I do want to pull out Susan's son, Arlie, who does a lot of work himself often. But and my son does some. But, I mean, it's just amazing how these roles, there's a, reversion. And it always tickles me, and I have to admit, I haven't said much about it in my family, how the men, and there are fewer and fewer of them, how they just sit. So if you're one of those guys, can I suggest that you get off your butts and help a little bit? I don't know where the default became. Well, I do know it's a patriarchy. Women are supposed to do all the work and get very little credit. And the men just sit around and enjoy. So I'm just saying, okay? Anyway, this is written by a woman who loves doing all this stuff. And she says this: I have always loved Thanksgiving, the way it focuses on gathering and gratitude rather than on gifts or God. I've always liked the notion that all across America, people are preparing a feast of some kind. I'm peeling potatoes in my parents' kitchen, and I feel like I'm communing with someone else peeling potatoes in Texas or in Maine. And this year, I don't just enjoy that feeling, I need it. If cooking is essentially grasping reality, making a Thanksgiving meal is sharing reality. And of course, she's now heading into the anguish, as she calls it, of the election, was in part the anguish of realizing that I and a shocking number of my fellow Americans are not living in the same reality. We are not reacting to the same facts or presuming the same truths. I don't understand what's in those voters' heads, and they probably don't understand what's in mine, but I do understand what's in the head of someone, and she should say a woman, doing the mashed potato math. The number of pounds of potatoes to feed a crowd of 15 minus that one carb averse eater and two picky kids, plus enough for leftovers. So there is this, she says that one day I will try again to understand these people's beliefs, to change their votes, to change our country. One day soon, I will once again use my mind to try to understand other people's reality. One day. But today, cooking for this holiday, at least my body knows what their body knows. Today, we're reaching for the next potato. We are all peeling with one hand and holding a potato with another, our grip growing slippery with starch. The flesh of the potato will quickly turn brown when it's bare to the air, so we plop it into a pot of cold water as we work. Some might not know this trick, of course. Some might not know about oxidation. Either way, though, potatoes do. She's talking about reality. And what she loves about cooking is how it's really chemistry. Um, anyway, it was a nice piece. I thought. I think I saw it in the Washington Post. Um, oh dear, guys. I know we had fun yesterday. Well, we can't have fun 2 days in a row. Anyway, um, some good news today with the ceasefire, potentially ongoing ceasefire between Hezbollah and Israel, and that is obviously good news. Um, and in large part, it is, I'm sure, to isolate Hamas, to expose it as an entity that is incapable of peace, of not wanting it, of in fact quite willing to kill all of its people to do what it wants to do, which is destroy Israel. If it cannot do it, I hope people understand Hamas's uh, strategy. If it's not clear, they knew in attacking Israel, because they started this, they knew in attacking Israel that Israel would hit back. They knew that by hiding underneath their people and behind their people, that their people would die. And they knew that the ensuing video of those poor civilians dying would cause an uproar around the globe and isolate Israel and demonize Israel and delegitimize Israel. And in that regard, their strategy has been hugely successful. But make no mistake, they are willing to let every Palestinian die to do what they most want to do, which has nothing to do with having Palestinians live. It is destruction, destruction of Israel. And that is why my heart bleeds for the Palestinian people, and why my heart is so enraged at those who think they're helping the Palestinian people by being in Hamas's corner, because the Palestinian people have no greater enemy, no greater enemy than Hamas. Okay. Um, I read something that is just so emblematic of the incoming administration, of the president, the incoming president. And I had seen, I know so many of you are really not looking, following, reading, listening to news, and I understand that totally. And I'm trying to do it in your stead, in as much as my psyche allows. But I had read this and seen pictures of this woman and seen her name. And I thought I saw that she was going to be his press secretary, but I haven't then seen it again, and I'm not sure. But I want to introduce you to this woman because uh, this is one weird situation, and you can make of it what you will. Her name, and you'll be hearing it, is Natalie Harp, like the instrument. Natalie Harp. She is a cookie cutter right wing news anchor type, because she was. The long blonde hair, the pretty face, the short skirts, the high heels. And she is a constant presence, just steps removed from the man who will soon be president again. Young enough to be his granddaughter, 33 years old, and she came to his attention because she showed up on the network that he incessantly watches, and from which he has garnered, it seems, the lion's share of his cabinet, of course, Fox News. She wasn't on Fox as a employee. She was on Fox as the subject of a story. And Trump, of course, was watching, because that's what he does, watch Fox News. And she showed up in a piece 5 years ago, so she was in her 20s. And the story was about how she had had cancer, and a kind of bone cancer, and that she credited Trump with saving her life because he had been president at the time, and he had signed a law called the Right to Try law, which is a fine law as far as I'm concerned, too, even though I don't know the fine print. But it does allow desperate people to have access to experimental medical treatments who otherwise, because of federal rules, would not be allowed because they haven't been approved for, human use. So she did get access to an experimental treatment. It did save her. And she was on Fox News to tout the fact that Trump was a savior. He saw the story. Obviously, he loved the story. He thought the storyteller was a babe. And so he invited her to speak at the 2020 Republican convention. Now, that was the one, of course, 4 years ago, where he lost ultimately to Joe Biden. But she appeared at that convention and told her story. And then she went on to become what she was destined to be, which was a television news anchor on a right wing network, farther right than Fox News. I think it was the One America News Network. I want to talk later about One America News Network and some of these other networks that you and I don't watch, that you and I don't even know where to get, that you and I are oblivious to, but networks and news sources that millions and millions of our fellow Americans constantly turn to for their news, even though these so-called news networks are only serving up propaganda, misinformation, disinformation, occasionally news. So Natalie Harp, at a young age, becomes one of the anchors of One America News Network. And since Trump also, of course, tunes into that, she further endeared herself to him. She, during her job hours, worked to assure Americans that Trump had been denied the presidency a second term because the election had been rigged and that Joe Biden was really not the president of the United States, but that Donald Trump was. And not surprisingly, she joined his staff. While he was still out of office, but about 2 years ago, he asked her to please come and be a little closer to him. Well, what happened since then is the creepy part because she, according to the New York Times, Maggie Haberman reporting, she sent Trump. Now, she's already at Mar-a-Lago. She's already at his side. In fact, she is so much at his side that this report says that she actually, when he was playing golf in Scotland, she ran behind his cart to keep him up to date with any positive stories or social media posts she could find because she knows how much he loves hearing wonderful things about himself. So even while he was playing golf, she was ensuring that this steady stream of laudatory news would be flowing into his ears. Such devotion. So even while she's that close to him, she writes him letters. Letters, ladies and gentlemen, not emails. She writes him letters. And how the hell they got their hands on some of this stuff, but it says here that the authenticity of these letters was confirmed by two people with direct knowledge. And, now this is where real journalism is telling you, believe this. We're not kidding. And yeah, okay, so here, just a few excerpts from Natalie Harp's letters to her employer. You are all that matters to me. I don't ever want to let you down. You are my guardian, capital G, and my protector, capital P, in this life, capital L. My guardian and protector in this life. Another letter. I want to bring you joy, to feel like we can get through a day without ever having to talk work. I'm just telling you, Natalie Harp, ladies and gentlemen. Ivanka, that blonde babe, his daughter might not be around him this time around, but he got Natalie. And another line from one of the letters. I want to get back to that synergy we used to have, where we'd talk about everything and nothing. Ladies and gentlemen, these are the words of a 33-year-old woman who will be at the president's side and whispering in his ear. Another factoid, she follows him around. She's never not there. She follows him around with a portable printer and a battery pack. So she can, again, hand him constant information in hard copy, hand him printed out things, social media posts, the same thing she was doing when she was running after his golf cart. She will do anything to please him. And when she's whispering in his ear, by the way, not only does she only tell him things that will make him feel good, but she also gets much of her information from a website, which perhaps you've heard of, but don't traffic in yourself, called Gateway Pundit, because it is a disseminator of right-wing claptrap and conspiracy theories. And Natalie gets a lot of her information from Gateway Pundit and then pours that doesn't pour it, she prints it out on her portable printer while carrying the battery pack and dogging the president's heels. Understand that there are men around him that aren't exactly liking this, just not surprisingly. And not liking that she doesn't seem to be operating in whatever organizational chart exists. So it doesn't seem as if she's reporting to anybody but him, and she operates largely on her own and with greater proximity than most people in the White House. She will, of course, not be called before the Senate. There will be no confirmation hearings. All of this is outside of all of that. And she will be and is an entirely separate stream of information directly to the president. Natalie Harp, 33-year-old right-wing news babe, and incredibly influential. I'm sure we'll be hearing that name some more. E writes, man, she sounds like a character for some James Bond film. Some villain sidekick. Yeah, no, well, here again, the show is subtitled, called Lynn Cullen Live, but the subtitle is You Can't Make It Up. You can't make it up. Ay, 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 ay. I forget where I read this, but it's been noted, of course, that an extraordinary number of the men that Trump has chosen for his cabinet and White House positions have been accused of or convicted of some kind of sexual abuse. And that is, again, not surprising because because people whose politics dovetail with the Trump politics, which we could certainly call neo-fascism. It is a hyper masculinized, in the sort of grotesque definition of masculinity, a hyper masculinized view of the world. And writing about that in the New Republic, Michael Tomasky said in one of his post-mortem pieces, it wasn't the economy, it wasn't inflation or anything else. Oh, wait, that's not what I want to talk about now. Oh, well, I'll go there. I'm sorry. Wrong little factoid I have here. But this is, I had said I wanted to talk about the right, like the right-wing news network. And that was what I wanted to lead into that. Tomasky says it wasn't the economy, it wasn't inflation. It was how people perceive those things. Now, that's a difference. And it's one that we need to, when we say, how could they? It is, if we're to believe all the reporting that's been done since as to why, and we're to listen to the voters who voted for him, who say it was inflation, it was the economy, it was the border. It was, Tomasky is saying, not really. It was how they perceive those things. And they perceive those things in the way that the right-wing media portrays them, which is often misinformation, disinformation, and propaganda. But the perception drives the action, in this case, the vote. So the perception of these things is important. And where people get their perception of things is really important. And what Tomasky wants us, on the other side, to understand is we didn't have a real understanding, a clue as to the extent of the right-wing media reach. You can live in it and never get a smidgen of the news you and I get. Unbeknownst to us, you think it's just Fox News? That's what we're always saying. Oh, it's Fox News. Fox News is, yes, one piece, but guys, it's the granddaddy. And it has begot this huge, and you could argue that before Fox News, there was, of course, talk radio, right-wing talk radio, Rush Limbaugh and all his local pretenders, right? Having gotten my start in blabbering on talk radio, I can tell you that it was an overwhelmingly hyper masculinized, conservative, right-wing environment, and only became more so. There was a reason I had a moniker, the lone liberal. So that was there. And back in that day, when people were driving in their cars, they listened to AM radio, talk radio. And that's where the seed bed was. And when you realize how long it went on then, for decades and decades, of that point of view, keeping people company, it isn't just tuning in the evening news, where some of us might have gotten information. It's being in your car commuting or being a salesman in the car, and it's a constant. So then comes Fox News. So you can leave your car and come home, and there's Fox News. And then there's Newsmax, which developed another TV network, but to the right of Fox News. Fox is like, I hate to tell you, I mean, Fox is like the New York Times compared to these others. There's Newsmax, and then there's the one that our little friend Natalie Harp emerged from, One America News Network. There is even more insidiously and frighteningly corporate ownership of local stations, Sinclair Broadcasting being the biggie, owns literally hundreds of radio and television stations around the country that easily encompasses almost half of Americans. I mean, and Sinclair, you've probably heard this. Sinclair actually, at the corporate level, creates content, right wing editorials, misinformation, disinformation, which it disseminates to its news operations. And there, so the local news anchor, a lovely, lovely young woman, looks a lot like Natalie Harp, and a nice young man, will, and these, everybody has done the research which shows that people most trust the local news anchors. And in the case of 40% of reach, they're Sinclair News getting, propaganda. Guys, um, they've been buying up newspapers too. By they, I mean right wing entities. They recently bought the Baltimore Sun. Podcasts dominated already by right wing operatives. iHeart Media, right wing folks. Trinity and Bot Radio, two massive Christian broadcasting networks. I haven't even got to Elon Musk's X or Trump's Truth Social. So when we think about how did all of this happen while we've been sleeping, while we've been assuming that people are sort of living like we are and tuning into what we tune into, that a good hunk, half, maybe more, of America has been subsumed in this right wing media environment, where no matter where they turn, to their phones, their computer, their television, their radio, podcasts, it's coming at them. And the other side, that'd be the one we tend to inhabit, we don't have anything like it. Because opposite all that is traditional media, which still is doing the both sides thing. We don't have, and even MSNBC doesn't come close. It comes the closest, I guess, as hapless as it is. But we don't have that presence. Yeah, there's some podcasts, but increasingly not in print, increasingly not in television, increasingly not in radio. So, again, when we think about how this happened, I don't have to define this, right? How we're heading into another term with this nightmare. We've got to wake up and understand that where we live is not where a whole bunch, if not most, other Americans live. And that they are getting a much, much more defined, steady drumbeat of specific choreographed, coordinated information, disinformation. It's why so many people still believe. It's why if you poll Republicans and say, who won the 2020 election, they really think Trump did. They do. They think it because every news source that they interact with has told them that. I don't know there ain't no easy fix to this, guys. As I've always said for the last 40 years, Republicans play the long game. We don't. We're not organized to do that. They play the long game, and it is now paying off. So, in many ways, we ain't playing on a level playing field. We can talk about the Electoral College, that we're handicapped in that regard. And when we talk about news environment or information environment, we are also operating on an uneven playing field and one in which we do not have the advantage. And it's important for us to know that. Delana writes, I'm in PR. Stories repeated over and over make narratives. Yeah. Stories win games, but narratives win championships. Well, we got to start creating narratives, and you can't do that if you don't have the environment, that constant to follow somebody from their car to their bedroom to their living room to their kitchen to which is what the right wing has created. And what's fascinating is that they created it largely by claiming that the media were overwhelmingly liberal. And media, and I'm talking now about this is back in the day, the broadcast networks, ABC, CBS, NBC, PBS, and the New York Times and the Washington Post and all the others, fearful that they would be delegitimized because of this constant complaint that they were liberal and propaganda outlets, began bending over backwards. While I was a young reporter, I saw it, began bending over backwards to show that they weren't. So the mainstream media, my God, they haven't been liberal in decades. Not really. They're doing journalism. That doesn't have, they're doing, reporting what people think or say, what they say, what is happening, what is being done. That's neither liberal or conservative or whatever. It's just journalism. But if journalism begets stories that the right wing doesn't like, they call it misinformation. They call it biased. And our side, such a bunch of weaklings, always capitulating, always saying, oh no, we'll prove that we're not, we'll prove it. Capitulating when the initial accusation is false, but it's creating that all important narrative. And over time, years, decades, people believe that story. It's truth to them. It's truth to them that Donald Trump is a victim, that he was being persecuted by the deep state, that the election was rigged. And I mean, all of this is, yeah, scary. And we don't have enough arrows in our quiver. Barbara says there's Tom Hartman. Mm-hmm. He talks about this kind of thing often. Yeah, I remember, um, boy, has to be 25 years ago. I had Tom Hartman on my show and we commiserated. We talked. But he's a lonely voice. You might listen to him, Barbara, and a bunch of other folks. Piddling, because there are not enough Tom Hartmans. Nowhere near it. Nowhere near it. It's just unbelievable. I mean, what they did in terms of talk radio is they created a template of what talk is, and the template did not allow for anything other than right wing, burn it all down kind of rhetoric. Um, that I lasted as long as I did, I'm proud of it because I never worked for anything other than you can bet a conservative corporation who are still willing to let this contrarian voice have some airtime because I held an audience, but that's not, it wasn't the template. Joyce says earphones in their damn ears all the time, all the time. Yeah, poison, pouring poison in. Barbara says conservative or regressive radio has an easier time of it because what it does is tap into people's lesser nature, their reptilian brains. Yeah. Well, you can see what, what Limbaugh trafficked in. Uh, again, hypermasculinity, hate, fear, uh, derogation of, I mean, it's just classic stuff, classic way. And what did our side, what does Tom Hartman do? He traffics in information, in explanation. Rachel Maddow in education. Let me tell you, can't come close to attracting an audience because people don't like being lectured to, which because we traffic in information and stuff, we sound more like lecturers. Limbaugh and his ilk sound more like entertainers. Now, there is a way, I think I got close to it, of doing both. But it doesn't come real naturally to a lot of left leaning people. I don't think so. They're too earnest and too serious. I don't know. Caller, go ahead. I'm sorry, I just saw you there.
Hi, Lynn. This is Michael from Chicago. We haven't talked or seen each other for a really long time.
No.
I was tuned in today live instead of normally when I hear you, it's well after the fact. But I had a couple of thoughts on what you were talking about. One is that another factor that it used to be that people that watched right wing media or listened to right wing media, they kind of also kept an eye out or ear out on regular news. And I think in the first Trump term, the fact that everything didn't agree with him that he called fake news, he created this concept that was gradually taken up and now is subsumes the right or just ordinary people on the right, that if it doesn't agree with your worldview, that it's somehow fake. And we didn't have that before Trump's first term. Like we sort of had people that would they'd listen to both sides and they preferred their sides. But I think now it has led to a lot of people just ignore whatever mainstream media is, thinking it's a conspiracy against, the MAGA way of thinking. And I felt like I know some people who I consider, like reasonable, middle of the road people. And I know they voted for Trump, and I would hear from them in the weeks or, a couple of months before the election. They would say things like, oh, well, I don't, Kamala believes in letting prisoners have free transgender operations. And that was so, irrelevant to the real issues. And yet they were caught up in them because their echo chamber would tell them like ridiculous things that were so unimportant. And then they'd get hung up on those because like all the emails they'd get, all of their social media that they were following would emphasize those things. I mean, if you look at the eating dogs and cats thing, that shows just how ridiculous it would get. And that yet there would be people on that side that wouldn't even question that. And and this leads me to another thing you were saying, that the combination of truth and entertainment. The last place where I see that is on late night, the television talk shows.
Yeah.
And yet I feel like, and so I'm grateful that those are there because they just sort of take things and show how ridiculous they are. But it didn't, I think there's a whole swath of people who think, oh, they're, partisan and all that. And they are partisan, but they're partisan for truth. But I don't really know how, I don't know how we combat this, but I feel like that's the biggest echo chamber we have is the Colberts and Seth Meyers and Daily Show and all that, because they will ridicule in an intelligent way ridiculous things happening on that side. And I'm hoping that continues to help a little bit in this next Trump administration, because that's the only place that in entertainment, that we're going to get like a laser focused on misinformation and why it's misinformation.
Yeah, it's daunting. It's daunting, the task we have if we're going to build a comparable media environment and narrative. We're too disorganized because we're a big tent. We're not organized. We are disorganized. And therein lies, in some respects, our strength, but it ain't looking like a strength these days. Not at all.
Well, and it doesn't help. It doesn't help that everybody gets their information through sort of curated corridors now, and there isn't the places from which there's not even really network television and news, and just in general, there's no around the office cooler shared experience. Everybody's got their own
right
information, and one side doesn't hear. I actually went out of my way during this, the recent campaign, to try to listen to what was going on the other side, and it drove me crazy because it was so much of it was just ridiculous. It was like, but I do also feel, it's too late to air this complaint, but even while it was happening, I felt that Kamala's campaign, which was probably fettered by, she took on Biden's campaign team, and instead of getting herself a fresh one the way like Obama did.
Well, she didn't have time.
Too many times. Well, I don't know. I mean, because I felt like, as she seemed when she took over, when she became the candidate, I found her very compelling, and she was saying stuff that I thought, oh well, this is going to lead to a win. But then she got more and more bland as she went along, and I felt like people were telling her not to, this stuff about not distancing herself from Biden, not showing like a vision of her own that was going to change things, because people obviously were in a malaise, and so they were susceptible to Trump articulating their frustration. So there were a lot of people that I don't think were Trumpers that voted for Trump because he made them feel like, on an emotional level, that he was going to shake things up. And I understand. I've often said I understand why a lot of people could have voted for him in 2016, because they were looking for something to change. But what I don't understand, and never will, is how, once he showed us how incompetent, what an idiot he was, why people would vote for him again. But it's true. And
well, again, another bit of.
But I think she didn't.
Well, it doesn't matter at this point that
she didn't address some of these things, some of these ads that were everywhere that, and she never talked about them. She never talked about the transgender thing. And I feel like with somebody like Walz as a running mate, who was so naturally progressive, for example, and even he got muted. Like, he did a lot of Trump insulting, but he didn't get to lead with positive visions of, here's what we could do. So somebody was telling them not to do it. I mean, it's clearly, it seems very true to me that they were advised to bland themselves down, and both of them could have been very persuasive. I think she, had she been able to talk more about policy in a personal way, she might have won.
Okay, but see, it doesn't matter anymore. It's all lost,
right?
Lost opportunity, and we got to move forward. But we got so much work to do. It's just a matter of figuring out where to start. I mean, obviously not just in one place, but we got a lot of work to do. And I think the biggest thing we got to do is get out of our own heads and realize how out of it we are in many ways about the reality of the way other people are getting information and living, and their perceptions. Because what Tomasky said in the New Republic, it wasn't inflation, it wasn't this, it was the perception. And that's where these narratives that are and stories that the right knows how to do, and we are like, I mean, just out of it. I don't understand. Anyway, hey, thank you for the call. I'm glad you were listening.
All right. Well, okay. Have a good Thanksgiving.
You too. You too. Okay. Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Let's see. Rust Belt writes, yeah, they dominate AM talk radio. Just look at the Pittsburgh area. About the only talk show host on AM radio here who's remotely liberal is Chris Moore. Is Chris still on? And if he's on in the weekend, right? I used to say, I mean, the one little period of time where I was on KD, I was on the weekend. That's where they put blacks, women, and liberals. At least they did, and then they eased up a bit, I guess, for a little bit, and then but they went bland. I mean, you either had to be a right wing flamethrower or bland. I don't know. Yeah, he's always on weekend evenings. Oh, for God's sakes. Well, that's I always called it the ghetto. It's where you are. So, guys, I told you we laughed a lot yesterday, but we ain't laughing today. I just want to end real quickly with an obit because I see we're out of time. And again, I want to wish you all a very happy Thanksgiving. Don't get into fights with your family. Try not to. A guy named Tony Campolo, uh, who was a evangelical minister headquartered in Philly, and he founded something called Red Letter Christians. And he did most of he just went around the country talking and talking and talking and trying so hard to pull evangelicals back to Christianity and away from the horror of the right wing, that politicize evangelical Christianity. Um, and let me see. I mean, he did so much. He was an activist too, so he did so much work, good work, helping people, living a truly Christian life. He died last week at the age of 89. But there's this one thing in his obit that I thought was wow, and I'll just share it with you. He wrote over 35 books. He had a PhD in sociology from Temple. He 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 helped put up over 50 schools in Haiti. But he spoke a lot. He'd go all over the country speaking. He did see now here again. He didn't have a radio show. He didn't have a mega church. Like our side, he was doing it the old fashioned way, horse and buggy, talking to live audiences, 500 or more a year, churches, conferences, while they are on the radio and on podcasts and in their mega churches, streaming. But here's one of the things he would do with his audiences. He would say, "So while you were sleeping last night, 30,000 children died of starvation or diseases related to malnutrition. And most of you don't give a shit." And then he would say, "And what is worse is that you are more upset with the fact that I said shit than the fact that 30,000 children died last night." I think that's pretty powerful stuff. Okay, just catching up real fast with some of what you've written. Uh, the Young Turks also talk about this topic of how the left has to confront the narratives and be less feeble in their response. And then he says, and they do a good job of it with a larger audience than Thom Hartmann. Well, man, all of those audiences pale, and they've got to be built up. And we've got to find people on our side who are entertainers. One of the entertainers we had, Al Franken, right? we ended up throwing him overboard because of some bogus bullshit. Just saying. Okay, I'm out of here. I'm sorry. I ended up getting myself riled up there at the very end. Hey guys, thank you so much. Next time I speak to you, it will be in December. That'd be Monday. Yeah. So it's going to get cold too. Stay warm. It's December, or will be. And again, and guys, help. Clear the table at least. Do a dish. Just saying. I'm just saying.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.